Hello, my name is Romy. On the day I thought would be the happiest of my life, my wedding, my brother sent a package that no one claimed, wrapped in silence and secrets. My husband, a man trained to see danger where others don't, stopped me with just one sentence. And in that moment, joy turned into suspicion, and family turned into strangers. Why would my brother send me something that could ruin everything? And why did my husband already seem to know? The spring air in Colorado Springs carried a coolness that felt like a blessing after a long day of nerves, makeup, and whispered prayers. I stood beneath an arch draped with white roses and soft blue fabric, a reflection of Garrett's Air Force colors. My heart thudded with joy, exhaustion, and something I couldn't yet name. As the final words were spoken and our guests cheered, I thought I was standing at the safest threshold of my life. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the familiar faces all blurred together in a haze of relief. For once, I wasn't the little sister trailing behind, nor the soldier drowning in regulations and deployments. I was simply Romy, newly married, finally chosen, wrapped in the security of a man who made promises he intended to keep. But then I saw him. My breath caught when my eyes landed on Colton, my estranged brother, standing toward the back of the crowd. His presence was like a crack in stained glass, barely noticeable to others but shattering to me. I hadn't seen him in years. The last conversation we'd had ended in manipulation, a request for help that left me torn between loyalty and exhaustion. Yet here he was, half smiling as though nothing had ever fractured between us. I turned away, convincing myself that today wasn't the day to dredge up the past. I wanted to believe that his sudden appearance was harmless, maybe even a peace offering. Then I noticed the box. It was small, white and plain, sitting neatly on the gift table beside packages wrapped in glittering foil and satin bows, no tag, no ribbon, no handwriting, just a presence so stark it drew me in like a magnet. I took a step forward. My instincts, trained by years in uniform, whispered caution, but my heart whispered curiosity. This was my wedding, my family, my celebration. Surely nothing could touch me here. My fingers hovered near the edge of the table when Garrett's hand clamped around my wrist. "Don't touch that." His voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the chatter like a blade. I looked up, startled. Garrett's eyes, usually calm and steady, were fixed on the box with a sharpness that unsettled me. The easy smile he wore all day was gone, replaced by a soldier's mask I had only glimpsed in stories he rarely told. Two of his old unit buddies, standing nearby as groomsmen, caught his signal and moved instantly. Their relaxed posture shifted into quiet readiness, scanning the guests, the exits, the table. The laughter around us dimmed. People started noticing. Whispers spread like smoke. My chest tightened. It was only a box, a stupid, simple box. Why did it feel like it hummed with danger? Garrett didn't look at me. His focus narrowed to the one figure I had tried to ignore. Colton. Our eyes followed the same path, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected, fear flickering across my brother's face. Not guilt, not pride, fear. And suddenly I was 17 again, standing in my parents' driveway, listening to Colton beg for money I didn't have, insisting that family meant saying yes even when it broke me. The memory collided with the present so hard I nearly lost my balance. "Romy," Garrett's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Trust me." The box was lifted silently from the table, carried out of sight by the men I barely knew but instantly recognized as warriors. The guests shifted uneasily, unsure whether to laugh it off or lean into panic. My wedding vows hung in the air like a fragile net, trying to catch everything before it unraveled. I forced a smile, let Garrett guide me back toward the dance floor, and tried to believe we could pretend this hadn't just happened. But as the music swelled again and the toasts resumed, I knew with absolute certainty that the damage was already done. Something dangerous had slipped into my perfect day, and it wasn't going to leave quietly. Nash caught my wrist before I could drift too far into the noise of the reception. "Come with me," he whispered, his voice as clipped as if we were still standing in formation. His eyes flicked toward the hallway at the back of the venue, away from the music and laughter. I followed without a word, the hem of my dress brushing against the polished tile. My heart was still thudding from the ceremony, from the white box, from the way Nash had frozen the moment with a single command. He pulled open a door, guiding me into a narrow service hallway that smelled faintly of bleach and coffee grounds. From inside his jacket, he drew out a manila folder. He held it like it might burn through his hands. This was inside the package. I frowned, reaching for it. He didn't let go right away, his knuckles white, before finally releasing it into my hands. The folder wasn't thick, but it felt heavier than anything I had carried that day. I slid the documents free, expecting something benign, a cruel prank maybe. Instead, I saw my name, over and over, bank statements, accounts I'd never opened. The balances were large, too large, and at the bottom of one page, a power of attorney form signed not by me, but by someone else. The name leapt off the page. Colton Varelli, my brother Merrick's legal name. My stomach dropped. My breath turned shallow. The room seemed smaller, like the walls had drawn in, trapping me. I closed the folder too fast, papers nearly slipping out. Why would this be here? My voice cracked. Nash's face was carved stone. That's what I need to find out. Don't say anything yet. Not until we understand the scope. I wanted to scream at him, demand every answer, but I couldn't even form the words. All I could feel was the cold slick of betrayal along my spine. When we walked back out into the reception, the hallways emptied into light and laughter. Strings of fairy lights glowed across the outdoor dance floor, the Gulf air warm against my shoulders. Music swelled, jazz, then country. Guests clapped in rhythm, glasses clinked. I forced a smile as people congratulated us, touched my arm, kissed my cheek. The bride in me nodded, thanked, smiled. The sister in me scanned the crowd with a sharpened gaze. I found him near the bar, Merrick, or Colton, whatever he chose to be. And he was laughing, glass in hand, his free arm around our mother's shoulders. Vera, her hair sprayed into perfect curls, her lipstick untouched. She looked every inch the proud mother of the bride, but when her eyes darted to mine, I saw the flicker. Too quick, but I caught it. Heat rose in me, like fire licking the edges of restraint. I maneuvered through the guests, weaving past dancing couples and well-wishers until I was within arm's reach. Merrick, I said, steady, though my throat ached. He turned away, pretending not to hear. He clapped a man on the back, threw his head in a laugh. The humiliation stung, but I redirected. I caught Vera's arm. Did you know? My words hissed low, urgent. About the accounts? About the signature? She blinked, then smiled so broadly it hurt to look at. Honey, don't ruin your night, she cooed, her voice honeyed with poison. It was all for your future. My future? I spat, barely keeping my voice low. Her hand cupped my cheek for an instant, the way she used to when I was small, but her nails pressed in just enough to hurt. Don't overthink it, Rami. You'll thank us one day. I jerked back, the bile rising so fast I had to steady myself on a chair. Thank them? For stealing my name? For playing God with my life? The reception blurred after that, laughter and music turning into a distorted hum. I danced when pulled onto the floor, smiled for photographs, cut the cake, but every glance landed back on Merrick. Every nerve screamed with betrayal. Later, in the hotel suite Nash and I had reserved, the silence between us felt heavier than any storm. I clutched the folder like a weapon. You need to tell me everything, I demanded. He was loosening his tie, but he froze mid-motion. It's bigger than you think. That's not an answer, I shot back. His jaw tightened. If I give you everything now, you'll be in danger before we can contain it. My chest ached, but not from fear. And from the widening crack between us. So what am I supposed to believe? That you're protecting me or protecting yourself? His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but he didn't move closer. Rami, trust me. Trust. The word felt foreign on my tongue. Later, when Nash was in the shower, I pulled the folder out again. My fingers traced the edges, and something caught, paper tucked into the lining. I teased it free. A slip of handwritten note, ink smudged. Tell her what happened to Alden, or I will. The letters blurred for a moment as my vision swam. Alden. My father. A name buried as deep as his coffin. I hadn't heard it spoken since the day of his funeral. I lay in the dark of our honeymoon suite, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound between Nash and me. He slept with the steady rhythm of a soldier used to shutting off his mind when the day was done. But my thoughts refused to rest. My hand reached into my bag almost on instinct, pulling out my old phone, the one I hadn't turned on in years. The screen flickered awake, its glow faint but enough to make my chest tighten. Buried among the voicemails was one I had never dared to delete. My father's voice filled the room, fragile and rushed. "Romy, I need you to know, not everything is mine. Some things, they're forged." The message cut off suddenly, like a rope snapped midair. I froze, staring at the phone, my heart pounding as though the man himself were standing in front of me. The official story had been so simple. My father, Alden, had died peacefully in his sleep, but nothing in that message sounded peaceful. Nothing in his tone suggested he was ready to leave this world. I pressed the phone to my chest and shut my eyes, memories clawing their way back. I remembered the night the news came. I was stationed overseas then, in uniform, half a world away. The email from my mother was clinical, cold even. "Your father passed in his sleep. Funeral arrangements are already made." No warmth, no explanation, just closure shoved down my throat like a pill too bitter to swallow. But I remembered something else too. I was home on leave a few weeks later, walking through the old neighborhood. Mrs. Halperin's porch light had been on the night of his death, she told me, hours past her usual bedtime. I had thought it strange, but grief had drowned out the detail. Now, with that voicemail echoing in my ears, it didn't feel like a detail at all. It felt like a warning I had missed. The phone buzzed in my hand. A message popped up, no name attached. He wasn't alone that night. Look into Merrick. My blood ran cold. I traced the number and my suspicion confirmed itself. The message came from Ms. Halperin. She had lived 2 doors down from us my entire childhood, the woman who used to bring cookies when Mom forgot birthdays. I dialed. She answered with a shaky breath. "I shouldn't be talking about this," she whispered, her voice aged but urgent. "But I saw someone outside your garage that night. It wasn't your father. It was your brother." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the nightstand, trying to steady myself. "Are you certain?" "I know what I saw," she said firmly. "He didn't belong there that night." And right after I heard sirens. I ended the call, my heart rattling like loose change in a tin can. Behind me, Nash stirred. He sat up, his eyes already awake, sharp. From beneath his duffel bag, he pulled out a wooden box I had never seen. "It's time," he said quietly. The box smelled faintly of cedar, worn by years of being hidden. On its lid was a strip of tape, holding a single key with no tag. Inside were photos of my childhood, scribbled notes in my father's handwriting, and, my breath caught, a power of attorney document. This one bore no signature. "This was Alden's," Nash explained, his tone careful. "He asked me to hold it for you before he died. I thought it wasn't the right time, until now." At the very bottom of the box, folded and yellowed with age, was a letter never sent. My father's handwriting shook across the page. "If you ever doubt Merrick, trust your gut. Blood doesn't mean loyalty." The ink trailed off, as if he had been interrupted. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. My husband's steady gaze was on me, but all I could feel was the weight of my father's words. I slept beside Nash that night, but my dreams were filled with locked drawers, burning paper, and the shadow of my brother's face at the edge of the porch light. The road to the lake house felt longer than I remembered, though it had only been 2 hours from Colorado Springs. The farther I drove, the quieter it became. No cell service, no hum of cars, only the crackle of tires on gravel. My father's lake house had been empty since the night he died, shuttered and ignored like a wound no one in the family wanted to probe. Now here I was, 2 days after my wedding, clutching a key that had lived in his memory box, a key meant for me. The front door rejected me. I tried again, jiggling, pressing hard, the sound echoing through the stillness. My stomach tightened, but the basement door, half hidden by brush, a door I barely remembered, clicked open under the weight of that little brass key. The air smelled of dust, cedar, and something older, like time itself. I stepped into a basement lined with trunks, one of them marked with his service number, others unmarked. A sealed envelope sat on top of a wooden chest. Across the front, in my father's bold strokes, "Use only if they come for you." My hands trembled as I set it aside. Behind a loose panel near the shelves, I found it. A safe, its face dulled with rust. The key turned smoothly this time, and the metal door groaned open like a voice from the past. Inside was not money, not jewels, but paper, stacks of it. Title transfers of property I never knew we owned, IRS forms with numbers that swam before my eyes, and receipts for ceramic shipments, each stamped with the name V. Bellerose. My mother. One receipt matched exactly the invoice that had appeared in that cursed wedding gift box. The pages felt heavier than they should. My breath caught and I sat against the wall, papers splayed across my lap. My father's warnings made sense now. They weren't about small family arguments. They were about survival, about identity. Every form, every receipt, each line of ink was part of a web with my mother's signature at its center. I wanted to scream, but the old wood around me wouldn't have cared. Instead, I folded the papers neatly, slid them into my bag, and locked the safe again. If I stayed any longer, the walls themselves would start whispering. That night, back at the hotel, Garrett waited for me. His eyes flicked to the folder in my hands. I laid it on the bed between us. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. "I ran a file on you before we met," he admitted, voice level but heavy. "Command told me you might be a risk vector because of your family." The word stung, worse than the cold basement had. My marriage, my vows, my trust, all shadowed by a file he had opened long before our first kiss. "So you married me with your eyes already on the back door?" I asked. "No," he said, softer now. "I married you because you are more than their paper trails." But I couldn't ignore what I saw. It was betrayal and validation all at once. Betrayal that my love had been cross-examined like a suspect. Validation that I wasn't imagining the danger. My family's lies were real enough to have been flagged by the Navy. My father's warnings echoed in my mind. They want your name because it opens doors mine never could. This wasn't about inheritance, it was about access. My identity as a key they could use to unlock everything they couldn't reach themselves. I went back to the documents, scanning again for any hope that it wasn't true. That's when I saw it, a crumpled notepad sheet shoved in the back. Across the page was a contract, faded but clear. HP Holdings, agreeing to work with Everpine Freight. At the bottom was my name, my signature, bold as if I had written it myself. But I hadn't. My throat tightened and I gripped the page until it nearly tore. Someone had stolen my future, piece by piece, setting me up to be their front. I wasn't just caught in the family's storm, I was their shield, their scapegoat, and maybe their sacrifice. And in that moment, I knew. The person forging my name hadn't just stolen my past. They were already writing the script for my future. Without me. When I walked into our condo in San Diego, I could already smell the faint trace of my mother's perfume. It wasn't the sweet floral she used to wear when I was a girl. It was sharper now, more deliberate, the kind that lingered even after the wearer was gone. But she wasn't gone. She was sitting at my kitchen counter, legs crossed neatly, hands folded like she owned the place. "You never did know how to stay in your lane," she said before I could put my keys down. Her tone was even, almost amused, but her eyes were colder than the Pacific fog outside our windows. My body tensed. I had been bracing for this, but the speed of her arrival told me something else. Someone had tipped her off. She knew I had been at the lake house. I set my purse down slowly. "You've been waiting for me?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I've been waiting for years, and now you've gone and opened doors you were never supposed to open." I felt the anger rise before I could stop it. Doors? Or safes, because I found your name on documents, Mother. IRS reports, shipment invoices, contracts, all with signatures that should never have existed. Her face didn't move, not even a flinch. You call it fraud. I call it protecting what your father built. Someone had to maintain it when he was gone. You were always meant to be the asset. You just never realized it. The word burned. Asset. Not daughter, not family. An object to be used. I shoved the folder of copied documents across the counter at her. This is what you call protection? Forging my name on contracts? Building shell companies under my clearance level? You think that makes me safe? Her voice sharpened like glass. It makes us all survive. You think Alden was clean? You think this family stayed afloat on military pensions and goodwill? Don't be naive, Romy. You inherited his access. That is your contribution. You don't get to walk away. My hands trembled, but not with fear, with fury. Don't you dare rewrite his choices to justify your own. Dad may have bent rules, but he didn't use his children as shields. The argument escalated so fast, I didn't hear the door until Nash appeared, still in his jacket from work. He stepped between us like he was breaking up a bar fight. Enough, he said firmly, voice carrying the weight of command. Vera, you need to leave. She stood, smoothing her skirt as if nothing had happened. You can push me out of this room, Nash, but you can't push me out of her blood. Remember that. Then she walked out as calmly as she had arrived, leaving her perfume and poison behind. The silence after her departure was deafening. Nash put a hand on my shoulder, but I shrugged it off. I didn't want comfort. I wanted truth. That night, long after he'd fallen asleep beside me, I pulled Alden's old sea bag back onto the bed. Something about the weight had always nagged at me. I ran my hands along the lining until my fingers caught a small, hard edge, a hidden compartment. Inside was a cheap burner phone, its plastic casing cracked but still functional when I powered it on. The screen flickered, then lit up with old messages. My heart pounded as I scrolled. Most were mundane, short logistics exchanges, numbers, initials, but then I found them. Conversations between Vera and Will dated 7 years ago. Arby's clearance level is confirmed. Use her for the holding shell. She'll never know. I dropped the phone onto the bed as if it had burned me. They hadn't stumbled into using me. I had been the plan all along. For years I had fought to prove I was more than a dependent daughter, more than the youngest Bellerose. I had built a career, a marriage, a life defined by my choices, and now it felt like all of it had been pre-scripted, written into someone else's playbook before I even understood the rules. Nash stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. What is it? I handed him the phone, my voice steady but cold. Run forensics. Pull everything. I don't care how old it is. He nodded, but the weight in his expression told me he already suspected what I had just learned. Later, when I finally opened the drafts folder, I found one unsent message. It was from Alden. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I read every syllable. They're circling closer than you think. Don't trust the signature, trust the timing. I didn't delete it. I didn't forward it. I just let it sit there like a ghost refusing to rest, because timing was all I had left, and the clock was running out. By the time we landed back in San Diego, I thought I had convinced myself to breathe. The lake house still clung to me like damp air, but I told myself a night in my own bed would quiet the questions. I was wrong. When I pushed open the door to our condo, the smell hit me first, a sharp floral scent, my mother's perfume. My chest tightened. She was here. Sure enough, Vera sat at the kitchen counter, legs crossed, hands folded like she was queen of a small kingdom. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked like she had been waiting. You never did know how to stay in your lane, she said. Her tone was steady, but there was a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. I didn't bother with greetings. You were at the lake house. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. I didn't have to be. Someone told me you couldn't resist digging where you didn't belong. She leaned forward slightly. And now you've stirred up things that were meant to stay buried. Heat rushed up my spine. Buried? I found your name, Mother. Contracts, transfers, shipments, documents signed with my name, not yours. How do you explain that? She stood, slow and deliberate, as if she were explaining a lesson to a child. I don't explain, I protect. Your father built something complicated, risky. You think a pension kept this family afloat? Don't be naive, Rami. You inherited his access. You were always meant to be the safeguard. The word hit like a slap. Safeguard, not daughter. You forged me into something I never agreed to, I shot back. You used me. She tilted her head, her voice sharp as glass. You were the asset. You just never knew the game. The fury in my chest threatened to boil over. I grabbed the file I'd carried back from the lake house and shoved it across the counter. This is fraud. This is theft. Don't pretend it's family loyalty. Her gaze didn't flicker. Loyalty is survival. Before I could reply, the front door opened. Nash stepped inside, eyes narrowing when he saw my mother. He moved quickly between us, posture tense. Vera, it's time you left. She smoothed her jacket, calm as stone. Push me out of this room, Nash, but you'll never erase the blood that binds us. Then she walked out, leaving her perfume thick in the air. The silence after her departure was heavier than any words. Nash reached for me, but I pulled away. I didn't want comfort. I wanted the truth. That night, long after Nash fell asleep, I couldn't shake the sense that I hadn't uncovered everything. I pulled Alden's old sea bag onto the bed again. Something about its weight nagged at me. My fingers searched the lining until they caught on stitching that didn't belong. I tugged, and a hidden pocket gave way. Inside was a small, battered burner phone. I held my breath as the screen flickered to life. The text messages were old, but they carried enough venom to feel fresh. RB's clearance level confirmed. Use her for the holding shell. She'll never know. My stomach lurched. Vera's initials. And Will. I knew that name wasn't random. It was my brother's old alias, the one he used when he wanted to keep his dealings in the shadows. The messages dated back 7 years. 7 years of being the plan, not the accident. I pressed the phone against my chest, my pulse hammering. For so long, I had thought I was living my own choices, joining the Navy, marrying Nash, carving out a life beyond the Belarus shadow. But if I had been their shield all along, had anything truly been mine? Nash stirred, half asleep. Rami, what is it? I handed him the phone. My voice came out steady, but it was the steadiness of steel. Run forensics. Pull everything. I need to know exactly how deep this goes. He nodded, no hesitation, and that should have comforted me. But a wall had already risen between us. Trust fractured in ways I wasn't sure could be repaired. When he set the phone down, I opened the drafts folder. A single unsent message waited there, saved years ago. It was from Alden. They're circling closer than you think. Don't trust the signature, trust the timing. I didn't delete it. I didn't forward it. I let it sit, glowing faintly in the dark room, a ghost of my father's voice reaching through time. Timing. That was all I had left. And the clock was running out. The condo was still when I woke, but Nash was already hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table. The burner phone sat in the middle like an unwelcome guest. Its black plastic shell looked too ordinary to hold the weight of what it carried, but the lines under Nash's eyes told me otherwise. I ran diagnostics, he said without looking up. This thing pinged a network 3 nights ago. Not random. It was activated from an IP tied to Vera's firm. My chest tightened. So they weren't careless. They wanted to know if I'd find it. He finally lifted his gaze to mine, his voice level but sharp. Exactly, which means we can't show our hand, not yet. The silence between us grew thick. He was asking me to sit still while my own mother treated me like a pawn. But I bit my tongue because for once, silence felt sharper than words. The following evening, we attended the Veterans event in Alden's honor. The ballroom in downtown San Diego was dressed with flags, portraits, and rows of medals glinting under warm light. People approached me with firm handshakes, kind words, rehearsed condolences. I smiled where I had to, but inside I was a coil of suspicion. Then Paul Jensen appeared, older, with weathered skin and eyes that had once shared missions with my father. He leaned close enough that his breath brushed my ear. "Romy," he murmured, "did you know you co-own a trust in the Caymans?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He pressed a folded card into my palm. "Alden told me to keep an eye on it. Said if anything happened to him, you'd need to know." My pulse thudded. I had never signed any documents tied to offshore trusts. The card burned in my hand until I slipped it into my clutch, pasting on a smile as another guest approached. Back at home, Nash traced the entity with his usual surgical focus, his screen filled with graphs and numbers, acronyms I only half understood. "It's tied to Everpine Freight," he said, and flagged by the IRS as a possible shell operation. I felt bile rise. So my name isn't just attached to forged contracts. It's washing money through an island I've never set foot on. He looked at me with a quiet warning. This isn't just family squabbling anymore. It's federal. I sat down, the weight of it pushing me into the chair. My fingers found Alden's memory box again. Something told me I hadn't reached the bottom of his secrets. Inside, beneath photos and notes, was an envelope addressed to me, unsent. His handwriting was hurried, uneven. "They may use your name after I'm gone. You don't owe the name anything, only the truth." I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling both anchored and adrift. That night, my phone lit up with a voicemail, a distorted voice, genderless, calm. "If you want to know what they're really planning, show up alone Friday night at the Pomeroy estate. No phones." The message ended with a faint click. I stared at the ceiling for a long while before deleting it, but not before memorizing the address, the time, the warning embedded between each word. The Pomeroy estate was a place I had only visited in childhood, a place that seemed to belong to someone else's life, not mine. That night, as I pulled my car into the long gravel drive, the moonlight glanced across the manicured hedges and statues that looked almost too pristine, as if they were arranged for an audience rather than a family. My chest tightened. The voicemail had said no phone, so I'd left mine behind, though Nash's pen recorder was tucked carefully in my jacket pocket. The greenhouse came into view like a mirage, glass panels glowing faintly with golden light untouched by years of neglect. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped into warm air, tinged with jasmine. Well, for a moment, it felt too serene, too staged. My gut told me to leave, but curiosity and the weight of Alden's unfinished warnings held me there. "Romy," Vera's voice coiled from the shadows. She emerged, elegant in her silk shawl, her smile calculated. "I was hoping you'd come. You always were the one who couldn't resist following crumbs." Her warmth didn't last long. With a tilt of her head, she sighed as though I had broken something delicate. "You think you're protecting the family? No, you're breaking it. Your father built something, and you've chosen to tear it apart." Before I could answer, Will appeared, stepping into the light with the ease of a man who expected the stage to be his. A small device blinked on his lapel, and I recognized it instantly. A body camera. He began with a lawyer's precision, questions wrapped in half-statements designed to trap me. "So, Romy, you admit you accessed Alden's accounts? That you took documents from the lake house?" His voice was silk-laced with venom. I kept my face steady, though my pulse beat hard in my throat. "I admit nothing. Families have stories, Will. Some of them are lies, some are truths. Which are you after tonight?" The faintest flicker crossed Vera's eyes. That was when I saw it. A red light glowing inside her clutch. They were recording me twice. One angle wouldn't be enough for whatever game they were playing. I slipped my hand into my pocket, feeling the weight of the pen mic Nash had insisted I take. I clicked it on. Then I offered them what I knew they couldn't resist. Funny, I said softly. How you always know where I've been before I even arrive. Will's jaw tightened. Vera's smile faltered. The power shifted for a second, small but real. I pressed into it, letting silence do the rest. Later, back in my condo, I set the recorder down and opened the old metal case Alden had given me years earlier, a keepsake I had nearly forgotten. Inside, nestled against the velvet, was a flash drive. Across its silver face was etched 3 words in his handwriting: truth before legacy. My hands shook as I plugged it in. Screenshots filled the screen. Everpine's fraudulent ledgers, transfers that linked to offshore accounts, lists of accomplices, and Will's name among them. Alden had known. He had started to dig, and maybe that was what killed him. At the end of the files was a single video. Alden appeared, tired but steady, sitting at his desk. His eyes met the lens with a weight that crossed time. If this gets to you, I've already failed, but maybe you won't. I whispered to the empty room. You didn't fail. My finger hovered only a moment before I uploaded the contents to an encrypted cloud. For the first time, I felt less like a daughter trapped in my family's shadow, and more like a soldier choosing her battlefield. The grand dining hall of the Everpine family vineyard had never felt more suffocating. The chandeliers gleamed, the table stretched endlessly, but what settled in the air wasn't elegance. It was expectation, sharpened into a blade. I stood at the head of the table, the files Alden left me stacked neatly in front of me. My hands were steady, though inside I felt the thunder of betrayal, grief, and defiance all at once. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice even, almost deceptively calm. Father wanted transparency in this family. Tonight, I intend to honor that. Will shifted uncomfortably. Vera's eyes narrowed like a cat scenting danger. I pressed play on the encrypted drive. Alden's files filled the screen projected on the far wall. Falsified invoices, Everpine assets rerouted through shell companies, contracts signed under aliases. Gasps spread like a ripple. This isn't conjecture, I continued. This is proof. Vera laughed coldly, the sound scraping the air. Do you really think you can come in here and rewrite history, child? You don't belong in this room. The words sliced deeper than I expected, but I stood taller, my chin raised. I belong here because Alden believed the truth belonged to me. Her mask cracked. Rage exploded across her face. She slammed her palm on the table. He pitied you, Rami. He brought you in because you were never his. You're not blood. You're adopted. That's why you were never meant to inherit. The room fell into stunned silence. My world tilted, but I refused to let my knees buckle. Nash's gaze met mine from across the table, grounding me. I inhaled slowly, my voice steady but steel-edged. If family is only blood to you, Vera, then maybe I'm glad I'm not yours. I slid a folder toward Alden's attorney, who had sat quietly in the corner until now. These go into legal custody. The sound of papers leaving my hands felt like shackles falling away. I turned, walking out with Nash at my side. Vera's voice, shrill and venomous, echoed after me. You'll regret this! I didn't turn back. My whisper was for Nash alone, but also for myself. No, I regret waiting this long. The morning light in Napa Valley didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt raw, fragile, like skin after a wound. I woke on the narrow couch of the small rented home Nash and I had taken, my chest still tight from Vera's words the day before. Not one of us. It echoed even in the silence, a refrain that wanted to make a home inside my bones. For the first time in years, I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to breathe. Nash had sat with me the night before, his hand resting on mine without demanding words. That quiet weight had kept me from unraveling completely. Still, I knew I stood at a cliff's edge, one more lie, one more betrayal, and I could lose myself to their poison forever. That was when the package arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Alden's. My father's. Even in death, his script was steady, deliberate. I sat frozen for a moment, as if opening it might break the fragile line between past and present. Then I tore it open. Inside was a single letter. His last words. "Romy," it began. "If this reaches you, it means the truth has already cut deeper than I ever wanted for you. I kept too much. I thought I was protecting you, but secrets are their own kind of violence. You must not let anger be the legacy of this name. Legacy is not vengeance. It's what you build beyond survival. Let go. Build more than I could. That is my wish for you." By the time I finished reading, my cheeks were wet, not with fury, but with something softer. Relief, maybe, or release. For years, I had carried the sense that my father had abandoned me to the wolves, but these words, his words, proved he had seen me all along. Later that afternoon, I drove to the vineyard. The air smelled of earth and memory. I walked to the edge of the rows, knelt in the soil, and pressed a small medallion he'd once given me deep into the ground. "I'm not burying you," I whispered. "I'm planting us both somewhere new." For the first time, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but free enough to imagine both. That night, back at the house, Nash brought me something unexpected. He held my gaze, his voice steady but urgent. "Romy, we don't have to carry their name anymore. We can make a clean start. We take your mother's maiden name. We build something real. Together." The words hit me harder than any accusation Vera had ever thrown. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the startling possibility of it. To shed the Bellerose name wasn't just a legal choice. It was cutting the last chain. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, the silence heavy between us, and for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a future not shaped by betrayal, but by choice. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to rewrite what family meant. Night in Napa wrapped itself around our little rental like a shawl that couldn't quite keep out the chill. A few days had passed since Nash's proposal to shed the Bellerose name, and the idea had settled in my chest like a slow, steady ember. I was sorting through the last of the boxes I had promised myself to face when I'm ready. A lie I had told so often it sounded like a lullaby. When my fingers brushed a small velvet pouch tucked at the bottom of a carton labeled Mom's Things. Inside was a flash drive, the kind you forget you own until it appears where it doesn't belong. A single strip of masking tape was wrapped around it. In my mother's handwriting, looping, careful, it read, "For Romy. Only if you're ready." I wasn't ready. I knew it by the way my hands trembled. But readiness is a luxury. Truth arrives on its own schedule. I set the drive on the desk, breathed through the tightness in my chest, and slid it into the laptop. The screen brightened, flickered, and then my mother filled it. Younger by a decade, hair in soft waves, the old bedroom light behind her. She looked right into the camera as if she could see me on the other side of time. Her mouth opened and closed once before sound found her. "Romy," she said, voice thin at the edges. "If you're watching this, I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I hope you will forgive me someday for that." She looked down, laced her fingers, and when she spoke again, it was with the blunt force of someone who had decided, finally, to stop lying to herself. "There was a period before you were born when your father and we were separated, just a few months. I made a mistake. I met someone and it ended quickly, but not before it changed everything. You are the result of that time." The room tilted. I didn't stand up, I didn't pace. I sat very still because if I moved, I worried I would come apart in a way I couldn't gather back. She kept talking, her voice gathering steadiness. "Alden knew," she said. "He chose you, completely. He signed the papers without hesitation. He raised you as his own, not out of pity, but out of conviction. I think he feared the truth would undo you more than it would free you. But he wanted you to know, if one day the world used it against you, that his love was never provisional." She gave a small, broken laugh and wiped at her cheek. "He told me, blood is circumstance, love is choice. I did not always live up to that wisdom. He did. The video froze for a heartbeat, as if even the file needed air. When it resumed, her face had softened. If others wield this truth like a weapon, that is their failure, not yours. Please don't let my secret become your prison. I paused the playback and closed my eyes. I could hear the light tick of the kitchen clock and the far-off sweep of a car rolling past. Ordinary sounds in the wake of something that refused to be ordinary. Vera's voice threaded through the quiet. You're not one of us. And this time it didn't pierce. It clarified. She had known. She had always known. Adoption wasn't the shame, it was the leverage. She had tucked the fact into her pocket and drawn it whenever she wanted the room to tilt toward her. I let the video run again. My mother added no names, gave no details of the man she had met. She offered no map to follow, only a careful confession, and then a plea. If this truth finds you, let it make you kinder to yourself, not smaller. When the screen finally faded to black, I realized I had slid off the chair to the floor, my back against the wall, the laptop a square of light above me. Tears came, but they didn't feel like surrender. They felt like the house flooding to flush out what had been rotting under the floorboards. I thought of Alden at the vineyard, the way he would rest a hand on my shoulder in passing as if to say, I see you even when the room doesn't. I thought of Colton's smirk when he got what he wanted. I thought of the gift box at my wedding, and the signatures forged in my name, and the ledger lines that turned my life into a column of numbers. A family doesn't become corrupt overnight. It spoils by habit, by the slow permission of silence. I had mistaken my endurance for peace. It was time to revise the definition. I called Nash because there was no one else I trusted to hold the moment without trying to fix it. He picked up on the second ring. I found a video, I said. From my mother. The words crowded each other. Alden wasn't my biological father. He said nothing for a long breath. When he spoke, it was gentle and exact. You are still you, Rami, the same woman who stood her ground in that vineyard, who keeps her promises even when no one is watching. The truth doesn't alter your core, it underscores it. I laughed, a small, strangled sound. It alters the math of a lifetime. Maybe it changes the math, he said. It doesn't change the answer. He offered to come over. I told him he didn't need to. He showed up anyway, 20 minutes later, letting himself in with the soft etiquette of someone who respects a person's solitude even as he refuses to let her be alone. He brewed tea like it was a tactical plan. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. He sat on the rug beside me, shoulder to shoulder, our backs against the same wall, the cooling mugs between our knees. It was enough. When he finally stood, he kissed the top of my head in a way that felt more like a vow than comfort. Sleep, he said. Tomorrow we keep moving. After he left, I walked to the bathroom and let the cold water wake my skin. In the mirror, my face told the truth back to me, swollen eyes, fatigue, and beneath it, a steadiness I recognized. I wasn't searching for resemblance anymore. I wasn't looking for proof that I belonged. I belonged because I had stayed. I belonged because I knew when to leave. I returned to the office, labeled the flash drive with the date, and slipped it into a fireproof envelope with Alden's letter from the day before. 2 different truths, each a hand on my shoulder. Let go of revenge. Don't mistake gentleness for weakness. Both could be true. Justice would be pursued in daylight. Revenge was a night animal that ate its own tail. I opened a new document and started a list. Contact Alden's attorney for certified copies of the adoption paperwork. Alert the investigator about additional motive for Vera's manipulation. Draft the petition for legal name change. Not to erase a past, but to refuse a brand. We would choose a name that acknowledged where I had been and where I was going. It would be ours. I powered down the laptop. The room went dim except for the desk lamp, a small circle of clarity in the dark. I stood in it and felt the ground return to my feet. If the past was going to hunt me, I'd better be the one holding the flashlight. The morning light crept through the curtains of my new home, soft and unhurried, as if reminding me that time didn't care about wounds or revelations. I stepped barefoot into the garden, dew still clinging to the edges of the young plants I had set weeks earlier. My fingers pressed into the cool soil, grounding me in a way bloodlines never had. Legacy, such a loaded word. And for years, it meant chains, expectations, silence in the face of cruelty. But here, tending to something that needed nothing more than sunlight and water, I understood Alden's words better than ever. Legacy wasn't inheritance. It wasn't blood. It was what we chose to plant, and what we dared to let grow. I brewed coffee and sat by the window of my small office. The desk still carried the weight of the letter Alden had left, Nash's unwavering voice echoing in the silence, and Vera's venomous declaration that I was never one of them. Each memory unraveled in slow reels, some jagged, others mercifully blurred. They had tried to define me by what I wasn't, not blood, not family, not worthy. But memory is a rope. I had two choices: knot it into a noose that kept me tethered to their cruelty, or climb it toward something freer. Today, my hands chose the climb. I pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. Not to Vera, not to Will, not to anyone who ever wielded silence like a weapon. This letter was to me, the girl who once begged for approval at closed doors, the soldier who kept fighting wars inside her chest, the woman who almost let other people's truths erase her own. I forgive, I wrote slowly, the ink trembling under my hand. Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. The words didn't taste sweet. Forgiveness was not absolution, it was reclamation. I folded the page, lit a match, and watched the paper curl into ash. It was not for them to read. It was only for me to release. Later, I dug a hole in the corner of the garden and planted a young tree. Its roots, fragile but insistent, disappeared into the soil. I pressed Alden's medallion, once a weight in my palm, beneath it. I wasn't burying the past, I whispered to the earth. I was planting something new. The act was simple, yet my chest felt lighter than it had in years. I thought of the young women on the base who still carried quiet scars from battles no one saw. I would stand for them, mentor them, prove that strength was not defined by the name etched on a family crest, but by the courage to build a future. As the sun climbed higher, I leaned back against the doorframe of my home and let the light spill across me. Forgiveness and letting go were not the same thing, I realized. They would never sit at my table again, and I would not invite them into my light. But their absence no longer hollowed me, it freed me. They don't need to be in my light for me to stand in mine, I said aloud, the garden listening like a confidant. And as the sun rose, I realized I wasn't just surviving this story, I was redefining my place in it. The courtroom was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that didn't come from air conditioning but from years of stories and secrets finally being pulled into the light. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, while Vera and Will stood to face the judge. They looked smaller than I remembered, their arrogance stripped away, their voices silenced for once. When the judge's gavel came down, declaring them guilty of fraud and identity theft, I didn't feel triumph. I felt calm, like a tide pulling back after a storm. Watching them being led away, handcuffed, was not victory, it was closure. Justice didn't erase their betrayal, but it returned my name to me. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like bees. Microphones pushed forward, flashes of cameras burst in my eyes. One voice rang clear. "Any message for your family?" I didn't hesitate. My name isn't a liability, it's a story of survival. The words hung in the air, heavier than any headline. For the first time, I didn't flinch when they called me a Bellerose. I stood steady under the bright California sun, my truth no longer a burden, but a shield. Weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a crowd of veterans and their families. The ribbon stretched across the entrance of a modest brick building in Napa, the sign above it reading the Alden Initiative. My throat tightened as I cut the ribbon, remembering my father's quiet strength, his unfinished fight. This is what legacy can be, I told the group gathered around me. Not a chain to carry, but a foundation to build on. For others, for tomorrow. Hands shook mine, smiles met me, and in every handshake I felt purpose settling in my bones. Children ran around the courtyard while veterans swapped stories over coffee. For the first time in years, laughter around me didn't feel borrowed. It felt like it belonged. A few days later, I went alone to Alden's gravesite. I knelt down and placed fresh flowers, my palm resting against the cool stone. "I made your trust matter," I whispered. The tears came, but they weren't heavy this time. They cleansed. When I left, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. I carried that light back with me all the way to the community center. There, in a small classroom, I stood before a group of young female officers. They looked at me with a mix of nerves and eagerness, the same way I must have looked once. "Strength isn't silence," I told them. "It's knowing your voice and using it." They nodded, some scribbling notes, others just watching. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time, I knew I was standing in my own light. I carry my father's name, and now a legacy I choose. Looking back on everything I've lived through, I've learned that family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by truth, courage, and the choices we make when the weight of betrayal threatens to break us. I realized that carrying someone else's secrets doesn't make you strong. It makes you silent. True strength comes from speaking, even when your voice shakes, and standing, even when you feel alone. If my journey has taught me anything, it's this. Justice takes time, forgiveness doesn't always come, but peace is something you can claim for yourself. I chose to plant new seeds instead of carrying old chains, and that decision gave me back not just my name, but my future. Now I want to ask you, what does legacy mean to you? Is it the story you inherit or the story you decide to write? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave me a comment, maybe just a one if this story touched your heart, or let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't like it, tell me why. I'm here to learn from you too. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Together we can keep sharing stories that remind us what it means to endure, to heal, and to begin again.